BJ Mafia, what's poppin'? Jags fans, we have just wrapped up the 2024 NFL draft class, and the Jags walked away with 9 total players in this year's draft class. I don't want to be too long-winded with this because I'm excited to talk about each and every single one of these guys with you guys here today. Now, 3 things before we go ahead and dive deep into today's video is 1, I'm not a Florida State fan. I know you guys see me wearing the Seminoles shirt, but Jeren Jones was absolutely my favorite pick from this year's draft class. So you know what? I'm gonna rep the Seminoles today. Secondly, thank you guys all so much for 6,000 subscribers, man. Road to 10K, and I appreciate each and every single one of you guys helping me and supporting me here on YouTube. And lastly, if you guys do appreciate the work and all of the Jaguars content that I make here on YouTube, make sure that you guys go ahead and drop me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe bell to stay tuned for more Jaguars content that I do here on YouTube, and make sure that you guys also go ahead and follow me on my socials, especially on Twitter. I'm very active and I'm on there every single day. The link tree will be in the description down below so that you guys can go ahead and check that out. But Jags fans, let's go ahead and get into today's video. Now, in the first round at 23 overall, the Jacksonville Jaguars took wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, and this was a home run pick for the Jaguars to get their wide receiver 1 of the future. Now, the Jaguars had the 17th overall pick in this year's draft before trading back to 23 overall with the Minnesota Vikings. And this was a win-win trade for both teams, even though I do believe that the Jaguars front office fleeced this trade. So the Jaguars not only picked up 23 overall, they also picked up a 5th round pick at 167 overall. And next year in 2025, they picked up a 3rd round pick and a 4th round pick. I loved that trade for the Jaguars. Now, Brian Thomas Jr. is the 5th Jaguars wide receiver taken in the 5th round this year. He joins that list with R.J. Soward, Reggie Williams, Matt Jones, and Justin Blackmon. And think about that. It has been 12 years since the Jaguars took Justin Blackmon in the 1st round. So it's been 12 seasons since the Jaguars took a wide receiver in the 1st round of this year's draft. And to give you some perspective with that, I was 11 years old when I bought my first Justin Blackmon and my first Jaguars jersey that I had saved up for as a kid. I had an MJD jersey, I had a Fred Taylor jersey, David Garrard, but the first one that I saved up for as a kid was Justin Blackmon. And as an 11, 12-year-old boy, he basically pissed my money away. So thanks, Justin Blackmon. Now, back to Brian Thomas Jr. In 2023, he was 3rd team Associated Press All-American, 2nd team All-SEC, and he led the FBS with 17 receiving touchdowns. And he played in 13 games, including 12 starts, and recorded 68 receptions, 1,177 yards, and 17.3 yards per reception. Brian Thomas Jr., I'm not going to necessarily say is better than Malik Nabers. They're 2 very different and talented wide receivers in their own respect. But Brian Thomas Jr. absolutely got overshadowed by Malik Nabers, even though they're both phenomenal wideouts. And statistically for Brian Thomas Jr., he only had 3 drops on the season and had a 50% contested catch rate. I loved this pick for the Jaguars. And Brian Thomas Jr. is a Trent Baalke prototype, built in the lab as a wide receiver in terms of his athleticism and his measurables. He came in at the combine, 6'3", 209 pounds, ran a 4.3340, had a 38.5-inch vertical, arm length 32 3/4 of an inch, and his hand size 9 3/4 of an inch. Brian Thomas Jr. is already an incredible athlete with elite size and frame at his position. He's got some of the best upside in terms of his ceiling in the entire 2024 wide receiver class, like I said, because of his length, his speed, his athleticism, his agility, and his ability to dominate on the outside. This is a guy who's going to make those 50-50 balls look like 80-20 balls. He can high point the ball in the air, does a great job of breaking in on his routes and sitting on some of those routes. He's got good footwork in terms of shaking his defenders in the open field. And this is a guy that can just take this simple crossing 5, 6, 7-yard route and take it 70 yards to the house. And Doug Peterson's gonna find a way to scheme this guy open, get him some easy looks going early on. And this is also gonna be a guy opposite side of Gabriel Davis, who the Jaguars just signed in free agency, that is going to be a vertical threat for this team. Forget a horizontal offense like we all just watched in 2023. Adding a burner who can take the top off of a defense opposite side of Gabe Davis. You've got to have two threats on the outside, and you're still going to have Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram working the intermediate parts of the field. This is a home run pick for the Jaguars. I am so excited to get this guy here as the wide receiver one of the future for the team. And the last thing I want to say about Brian Thomas Jr. is this. He does not have the pressure of coming in and immediately being the wide receiver one, being the focal point of our offense. He can just come in and play his role because you have Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Gabe Davis, and Etienne out of the backfield. That's going to have to put a lot more eyes on the rest of the guys, and it can free him up. I'm super excited to get this guy here to Jacksonville. Now, before I go ahead and dive deep into the rest of this draft class, I will say I did launch my Patreon a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure that you guys have seen that, but if you haven't, it's a great way to support me outside of YouTube for just $2 a month. I don't expect everybody to go there, but it's a way for you to also get way more exclusive draft content and film content from me with this entire draft class. When you talk about draft profiles and film breakdowns, you guys are going to love that content. I just want to put it out there for you guys as another way to support me. If you guys want to check out my Patreon, the link tree will be in the description down below. Now moving into the second round at 48 overall, the Jaguars went with a little bit of a reach. If you ask me, I think this guy was more of a third round pick, but nonetheless, the Jaguars took interior defensive lineman Mason Smith from LSU. So they went back-to-back picks with LSU guys, and I'm honestly not upset at all because Mason Smith has tremendous upside. When you look at his frame, his stature, and his physicality, with his size, this guy could potentially end up being a home run pick for the Jaguars as well too. Now, Mason Smith was a redshirt sophomore. This is definitely another traits guy for Trent Baalke. Unfortunately, Mason Smith back in 2022 was injured in the first game versus Florida State, of all things, with an ACL injury while celebrating after a tackle for a loss. You just feel for a guy like that who ended up having to miss the entire 2022 season. But he came in at the combine, 6'5", 306 pounds, his arm length 35 inches, good hand size 8.5 inches, ran a 5.01 40-yard dash, had a 31-inch vertical, and a 9-foot broad jump. He started 12 games, including 28 tackles, 4.5 tackles for a loss with 2.5 sacks, including 18 hurries and 2 passes deflected. This is a guy, Mason Smith, who's got great upper body strength, tremendous upside. I want to reiterate how much his upside is going to play a factor into where he was drafted with his frame and size. He's got a quick first step. He's going to be a force in the middle on running plays, stuff in the A and the B gap. He's going to be a guy who's going to create a lot of pressure up the middle in the A and B gap on pass rushing situations. And this is going to be a serviceable rotational pass rusher. And I'm going to get more into Mason Smith in just a little bit, but I want to move into the next pick into round 3. Now in round 3 at 96 overall, my favorite pick from the Jaguars in this year's draft class, they took defensive back from Florida State University, Jeren Jones. And he spent 5 seasons in college, 4 seasons with Florida State, and his first season in college as a freshman in 2019 with the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Jeren Jones will be 23 years old in a few weeks, so happy early birthday, young man. At the combine, he came in at 6 feet tall, 190 pounds, 30-inch arms, 8 5/8 of an inch hand, ran a 4.38 40, had a 39.5-inch vertical, a 10.9 broad jump, and he tested as the second most athletic corner in this year's draft class at the combine. If you go back to my video a couple of weeks ago with me and Jordan DeLugo doing a full 7-round mock draft, we had both mocked Jeren Jones to the Jaguars, and I am hella excited to get this guy here to Jacksonville. Now, back to Jeren Jones. He was an honorable mention to All ACC this past season in 2023, played in 12 games, including 9 starts. He recorded 25 tackles, 5 tackles for a loss, 3 interceptions, 1 of those he housed, and he had 3 pass breakups and 1 forced fumble. Now, opposite side of Renardo Green, 394 of his 453 snaps were lined up on the outside as a corner. He allowed just 16 receptions on 32 targets, so 50% completion percentage, and he had a 25.3 NFL passer rating in coverage. This guy is locked down. And here's a quick fact for you guys as well too. The last 2 seasons for the Florida State Seminoles, Jeren Jones has allowed 0 touchdowns in coverage. This is one of the best press man coverage corners in this year's entire class, and especially with the Jaguars now having new defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen here, that is going to fit this scheme perfectly. You get a dog on the outside, an athletic guy who's going to stay attached to his wideouts, physical, hard-nosed. This is a dog you're getting. And Jeren Jones takes great angles, getting a lot of pass breakups. He stays attached to his wideouts, hip to pocket. And this is a guy who's just athletic, a freak on the outside. And this is a guy who's an absolute freaking dog. Like I said, he's incredible in press man coverage. He was ranked as the 4th highest graded press man corner according to NFL Draft Buzz, and had a 90.7 man coverage grade according to PFF. And this kid has so much potential on the outside or as a nickel in this Jaguars defense, and I think he can be competing with Ronald Darby on the outside in day one. The last thing I want to say about Jeren Jones is when I saw that video of that phone call with his mother and his family, and you can hear the emotion in his voice, how ready he was for this opportunity. You got nothing but love for a kid with like that, who's got that kind of heart. I'm so excited to get Jeren Jones here to Jacksonville. Now, the Jaguars had 2 picks in the 4th round. The first one at 114 overall, the Jaguars took left tackle from Missouri University, Javon Foster. And this was a guy a couple of months ago that I had been talking about projecting to the Jaguars, and Javon Foster, sure enough, ends up here in Duval. He just wrapped up his senior season for the Missouri Tigers, and he spent 5 seasons there, been there since 2019, and he just turned 24 years old back in March, so happy late birthday, Javon Foster. He came in at the combine, 6'5", 313 pounds, good arm length, 34 5/8 of an inch, hand size, 9 5/8 of an inch. He ran a 5.3 40, had a 32.5-inch vertical, and an 8'10" broad jump. This past season for the Missouri Tigers, Javon Foster was 3rd team Associated Press All-American, 1st team All-SEC, and he started all 13 games as a captain. He played left tackle for the Tigers all 5 seasons in college. And this past season in 2023, in 449 pass blocking snaps, he allowed just 1 sack, 0 QB hits, and 12 quarterback pressures. Now, he was penalized 10 times, so you're going to have to work on that, but this is a guy who's going to be great in the run game as well too in terms of run blocking. He had an 85.8 PFF run blocking grade, which ranked 4th among all draft eligible tackles in this year's class. Now, Javon Foster, this is a guy that gets off the ball very well, has good reactionary skills with his timing, engages very well in his blocks in both pass protection and in run blocking when driving guys backwards. But some of the negatives with him from everything that I've watched in the past, he's gonna have to work on his hand placement and his footwork, especially letting guys who are faster off of the edge get around him. That's where you saw him got in trouble and getting penalized a lot. But with the Jaguars' current offensive line situation, he's not asked to come in and be a day one starter. You've got your starting 5 on the offensive line. He can serve as a very serviceable depth piece and learn behind some savvy veteran players in guys like Kelen Robinson, Brandon Sheriff, Ezra Cleveland, etc. I really like this move to beef up the offensive line. You continue to fortify the trenches. Javon Foster, I'm loving this pick. Now with the other Jaguars 4th round pick at 116 overall, the Jaguars went LSU Tigers yet again, the 3rd LSU player that we took, the 4th Tiger that we took, and the Jaguars went interior defensive lineman Jordan Jefferson. Now, this is another interesting pick for the Jaguars because if I was Trent Baalke at that moment, I probably would have gone Muhammad Kamara, went and got an edge player, but you know what? I'm not gonna complain about getting more guys in the trenches and getting more depth on the interior. Now, Jordan Jefferson spent 5 seasons in college, 4 at West Virginia, and his final season at LSU in 2023. Now, here's an interesting thing. When you take a look at the Jaguars getting Mason Smith and Jordan Jefferson, one of the Jaguars' defensive assistants and linebackers coach, Matt House, was recently the LSU defensive coordinator and linebackers coach in both 2022 and in 2023, which is probably how he was giving Trent Baalke in the front office some insight because he was working up close and personal with both of those guys. That's just speculation, but I would assume that has something to play a role and a factor into it. Now, Jordan Jefferson came into the combine at 6'3", 313 pounds. His arm length, 33 1/8 of an inch. Hand size, 9 7/8 of an inch. Had a 31-inch vertical, an 8'8" broad jump, and did 34 reps on the bench press. Let me say that again. 34 reps on the bench press of 225 pounds. Now look, I'm gonna act like I'm surprised or I'm shocked by that, but to be honest, I'm not really that impressed. Like, to be honest, that's light work for a guy like me. But He did play in 13 games for the LSU Tigers this past season, including 6 starts. He recorded 36 tackles, 7 tackles for a loss, including 3 sacks, a pass breakup, and 1 forced fumble. He had a 72.4 run defensive grade, according to PFF, which was the best of his 5-year collegiate career. Like I said, I do think it's an interesting pick. I do think he's going to be serviceable as an interior depth piece on the defensive line. And he's definitely going to help a lot in terms of run defense. But you know what? Jordan Jefferson, welcome to Jacksonville. Now moving into the 5th round at 153 overall, the Jacksonville Jaguars took defensive back from Ole Miss, Deontre Prince. Deontre Prince just wrapped up his senior season for the Ole Miss Rebels. He came in at the combine at 6 feet tall, 183 pounds, ran a 4.38 40, so good speed on the outside, a 34.5-inch vertical, and a 10.5 broad jump. He tested as the 9th most athletic corner at the combine. And this past season for the Rebels, in 2023, he took 732 snaps on the outside as a corner, and 446 of those were covered snaps. He allowed just 24 receptions on 45 targets, which is a 53.3% completion percentage. He allowed 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, had 5 pass breakups, and a 91.1 NFL passer rating when targeted in coverage. I will say, don't know too much about the guy, especially a handful of these guys towards the bottom of our draft class, but I think he's got good speed, good athleticism, could potentially serve as a solid depth piece. Guys like Buster Brown and guys like Eric Hallett that we've seen in the past as just depth pieces. And maybe this guy could be valuable on special teams. I think the Jaguars see something there with his athleticism. Now with the Jaguars' other 5th round pick at 167 overall, which we acquired from the Minnesota Vikings, the Jaguars decided to use that pick on running back from Texas, Kelen Robinson. And I gotta be honest, this pick baffled me. Why the hell did we take a running back here? But you know what? I'm not here to judge. Let me just state the facts. Kelen Robinson was running back 4 for the Longhorns this past season. Let me state that again. We drafted running back 4 from the Longhorns this season. He was playing behind Jonathan Brooks, CJ Baxter, and Jadon Blue. But Kelen Robinson spent 4 seasons in college, his first year at the University of Alabama, and the last 3 as a Longhorn. He came in at the combine, 5'8", 191 pounds, ran a 4.42 40, so doesn't really have breakaway speed, even though his game speed does look very good. 33-inch vertical and a 10.5 broad jump. So average athleticism, I would say, for his height, his size, and his frame. He played 13 games this past season for the Longhorns, including 1 start. He had 12 rushing attempts, a dozen rushing attempts, 134 yards rushing, 11.2 yards per carry, including 3 rushing touchdowns. He had 8 receptions, 56 yards out of the backfield. That's just 7 yards per reception. And this is where the Jaguars are going to see his value and his worth, opposite side of Devin Duvernay, with the new kickoff rule. He had 22 attempts returning kickoffs this past season, 494 yards and 22.5 yards per return. He did house one as well too. This guy's a special teams guy, I think, at best. I doubt he gets involved into the offense. Maybe if we would have took a Blake Watson, a guy out of the University of Memphis, another running back that I thought could be like a Darren Sproles type of guy, just because we have guys like Tank Bigsby and Dearness Johnson still here. But yeah, the Jaguars took, what's his face again? Kelen Robinson from Texas. So welcome to Jacksonville, buddy. Now moving into the 6th round at 212 overall, the Jacksonville Jaguars took kicker from Arkansas, Cam Little. And this is a guy who I think has the potential to be the next Josh Scobie or Josh Lambo and just our franchise kicker for a very long time. Cam Little spent 3 seasons at Arkansas, and as a Razorback, he made all 129 of his extra point attempts, 53 of 64 on field goal attempts, which is 82.8% of those kicks going through the upright, and 7 of 11 on his field goal attempts of 50 plus yards. There was a video I just saw of him on Twitter drilling a 61-yard field goal attempt. This kid is going to be nasty. When you take a look at the Jaguars kicking room and their situation, the Jaguars have not only been searching for a kicker post Josh Lambo, because they've been recycling guys. Joey Sly has a big leg, but he's inaccurate. Riley Patterson is accurate, doesn't have a big leg. Cam Little possesses both of those qualities and traits, and he's young. I'm excited to get this guy here to Jacksonville, and I think this is going to be your starting kicker come week 1. Now, the last pick that the Jaguars had in this year's draft class was at 236 overall in the 7th round. They took edge from Texas Tech, Miles Cole, and if there's a definition of a trait and measurables guy that fits the Trent Baalke prototype, it is this guy. This guy is built in a lab. Myles Cole came in at the combine at 6'6", 278 pounds. His arm length is ridiculous. 36 7/8 of an inch. Hand size, 9 7/8 of an inch. He had a 4.67 40, 35-inch vertical, a 10-foot broad jump, and this guy has a wingspan of 7'3". This guy has the wingspan of Victor Wembanyama, Shaquille O'Neal, Rudy Gobert. Why the hell is this guy not playing as a power forward in today's modern NBA? I don't know. But you know what? He's here in Jacksonville. If you took a look at Myles Cole in 2023, he was an honorable mention for all Big 12 conference. He started 12 games, recorded 32 tackles, 6.5 tackles for a loss, including 3.5 sacks, 27 pressures, and 1 pass deflected. Not really sure what to make of this pick. Maybe this guy ends up making the roster as a serviceable, rotational edge rusher. Maybe he turns into something great. I'm not really sure, but you know what? That wraps up all 9 guys that the Jaguars have drafted in this year's class. And like all of these guys, I'm gonna go ahead and do in-depth draft profile and film breakdowns of them on the Patreon. So it's a good reason for you guys to go ahead and check that out. But Jags fans, that's really it for this entire draft recap. I wanted to go through and talk about all of these guys just briefly. I will do a lot more in-depth content with them on the Patreon in terms of a draft profile and a film breakdown of them individually. But Jags fans, please let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below about Trent Baalke's draft class, and who was your favorite player that the Jaguars took in this year's class. I gotta say, for me, it was either Brian Thomas Jr. or Jeren Jones, but I love the value that the Jaguars got. And the last thing I wanna say before I let you guys get on up out of here is, to be completely honest, because I don't know if a lot of you guys are drinking the Kool-Aid, but I saw a lot of people on Jaguars Twitter giving this draft class like an A or an A+. Let's pump the brakes. Let's see if the Jaguars can even hit on 3 of these guys. I think Brian Thomas Jr., Cam Little, and Jeren Jones are 3 guys that are absolutely definitively going to be great players for this team. The rest of the class, let's see, because the floor, I think, is at a C. I think this is a C class at best. And that's just me being completely honest. There is tremendous upside with the ceiling of these guys: Javon Foster, Mason Smith, and Jordan Jefferson. A lot of these guys have potential and upside, especially Myles Cole. But upside, traits, and potential can only get you so far. How are you going to produce? How are you going to perform at training camp throughout the preseason? And are you going to make the roster? This draft class has A to A+ potential, but the floor is at a C. I see this as just an average draft class. It might be the best draft class that we've had since 2021, but let me pump the brakes. Let me just give my honest opinion. That's just where I stand on it with it. But Jags fans, like I said, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you guys again for sticking around throughout the whole video. Brett James, aka BJ, I'm out, y'all. And like always, let's go Jags.